Hey everyone, I'm Jairus Days, and welcome to Thursday, June 13th, 2024. This is your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. In my mind, there's one choice for roofing around here, and I'd go with your best choice. That's because Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by your Metro Detroit Best Choice Roofing. Whether it's time to replace your roof, repair it, inspect it, or get your gutters cleaned, Best Choice Roofing provides top-notch roofing services tailored to meet the unique needs of Detroit homes and businesses. They serve the region and inside the city of Detroit, too. Find out more at bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com. That's bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com. Or call 313-474-7031. That's 313-474-7031. And be sure to support the businesses that support us. Joining me at the table at the Mackinac Policy Conference is Ryan Hertz, the CEO and president of Lighthouse Michigan, right?
Yep, Lighthouse Michigan.
Excellent. Thanks for coming to Daily Detroit.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So let's set the table a little bit. You do a lot of stuff around affordable housing. There's been so much stuff that you've been doing during the pandemic. I've been hearing your name here and there and the project's name here and there. But for people who are unfamiliar, talk a bit about Lighthouse and kind of what the core mission is.
Sure thing. So Lighthouse Michigan is actually the result of a merger of two long-standing human service organizations in Oakland County, Lighthouse of Oakland County and South Oakland Shelter, or SOS. And both organizations actually started as emergency service providers founded by the faith community, one as an emergency shelter, and the shelter for decades actually operated out of churches and synagogues, moving every week in order to essentially provide badly needed emergency shelter in a community where it wasn't necessarily viable to build a freestanding shelter building. And so we leveraged volunteers for many, many years, congregation buildings for many, many years. And similarly, Lighthouse of Oakland County was originally called Lighthouse Emergency Services, was founded in the 70s, originally as a food pantry out of the back of a Catholic church in Pontiac, and then similar to what we did at SOS. So my background is from SOS. I've been with that organization since 2010. Similarly, started asking the questions of, why are people coming to us needing these emergency services? What else can we do for them? How can we help them get to a place where they don't need emergency services? And so at South Oakland Shelter, what that's meant has been, how do we stop evictions in the first place? How do we get people out of the shelter into housing, keep them in housing, help them find stability, reduce recidivism, right? And so that took us down a long path that eventually landed in affordable housing development, because once we were providing rental assistance and supportive services, we realized the barrier isn't just income. We have an economy that really requires low to mid-income workers in order to function. The problem is affordability for parts of our economy that are necessary to our economy. And even when we have rental assistance, we can't find affordable units for people. And so we started down the path of affordable housing development. And similarly, Lighthouse of Oakland County started down the path of other emergency services to help people, and eventually formed a transitional housing program and formed a parent company called Lighthouse of Oakland County, and then a third subsidiary focused on community development and affordable housing development over many years. And we came together in 2019 to really just align all of these assets and passions and resources and relationships and geography to try to do more with the limited resources that we have. And then others have jumped on board as well. So just last year, all of the runaway and homeless youth programs that were previously at Common Ground in our community came on as Lighthouse programs. So in some ways, we're a mashup of some really long-standing both human service and emergency service programs and initiatives, as well as community development and affordable housing development initiatives. To us, the significance of that is the people who are impacted by all these things are generally the same people, and what we're able to do for them is really just positive for everybody, our economy and everyone who lives in our region.
Well, I think a lot of the conversation about affordability and dealing with people and equity is focused on the city of Detroit, but there's a lot of challenges across the region as well. And it's one of the reasons I think it's interesting that you're in Pontiac, and maybe help share with people kind of like the scale of the issue that's going on.
Yeah, so obviously Detroit is generally the focal point. In some ways, Pontiac is sort of a fractal of Detroit in regard to how it functions in our geography and economy, the challenges that residents have faced over the years, the divestment, And unfortunately, we haven't seen nearly the same degree of reinvestment back into Pontiac as an urban center that we've seen in Detroit, although we have been making some significant progress in recent years. The scale of the problem, it really depends on how you define the problem. So if we're talking about homelessness, for example, we can look at point in time count data, and we still are really only just getting a glimpse of that. I view the scale of the problem to really be the issue of the general lack of affordability as sort of a metric of how many people live in our region, how many households are in our region or in our area of focus that are at risk, right? So if they're coming to my shelter, that just means that it's an extremely acute situation that's reached a boiling point. But there are many, many families in our community that are almost there or are making extremely difficult decisions that are not necessarily allowing them to address generational poverty. You have families who have to decide, do I want to live in a place where my children will receive an education that puts them in a competitive situation for the future? Or do I want to not spend 60% of my income on my rent, right? And or do I want to fix my car? Or do I want to, buy groceries? It's amazing how many people who we don't see completely get to the place of eviction that are struggling. And so defining the problem is hard. Prior to the pandemic, we had between 20 and 30,000 households in Oakland County that were rent burdened, which means they're spending more than a third of their gross income on rent. And these are specifically very low income residents. And that's increased dramatically since then. I think the most recent numbers I saw were over 100,000.
Wow. What has driven that increase?
Both challenges around income, and the pandemic definitely had a big impact on that. More so that rents have gone up dramatically, construction costs have gone up dramatically, so it's much, much harder to both care for and redevelop affordable units and to develop badly needed new affordable rental units. And the appraisal gap in Pontiac specifically, we're based in Pontiac, but we serve, at this point, we have projects really spanning Southeast Michigan. Our goal is to go broader, but our heart and soul is kind of in Pontiac, where we're headquartered on the loop there. Folks might recognize us. We're the actual lighthouse when you get up onto the loop. It's kind of funny. I say actual lighthouse, but
good branding.
Yeah, there's a physical lighthouse there. It actually, I don't know how or when or where the controls are. It does turn on at night. It must be on a timer. Haven't been able to find.
Is it your lighthouse or
it is?
Okay.
Yeah, it's on our property. It's sort of been inherited through our merger, and when you're coming onto the loop, right as Woodward splits off, we're right there. The 2 blocks basically behind that lighthouse on your right are the campus that we're working on redeveloping. In Pontiac, the appraisal gap is such that whether it's for single-family homes or multifamily homes, it's very difficult to make the case for capital to preserve or create new units.
Yeah, that is an issue that we're seeing in other parts of the region as well. And, Metro Detroit and Michigan kind of had this reputation. It still is relatively cheaper than some other areas in the country, but it is no longer a cheap place to be, right? Like, that's part of the thing for years. I remember 10 years ago, Michigan's so affordable and all these other things. And I feel like, especially after the pandemic, that shifted a lot.
Oh, certainly. And of course, okay, so sure, our cost of living might have been less than other communities, but income levels were less than other communities.
I think we forget about that, right?
Yeah, certainly. So it's relative. I think that housing in particular, while it's not our only focus by any means at Lighthouse, is the area that I think of as sort of the primary pressure point that we can push that really impacts everything else for households, the economy. We can try to dig ourselves out of these problems by saying we just need to educate people and do workforce development and help people find higher paying jobs. Well, the reality is that the way our economy currently operates, for every high income job we create in an economy, we're creating 4 to 6 low to mid income jobs to support that household and that community. Everyone needs to go grocery shopping. Everybody needs service workers. There's a need anywhere, no matter what the income levels are of some people in that market, for jobs that our current economy do not value nearly at that level. And so what that means is to the degree we try to solve poverty at the individual level exclusively by just through education and opportunity, we'll either lose those people because there isn't a job for them locally and they go somewhere else, or we grow our economy and we create the need for more low to mid income workers. We can't do that and then ignore the fact that housing is inaccessible to people that we need to make our economy work. Southeast Michigan might be relatively less expensive. also relatively lower incomes. And despite all of that, somebody, all things being equal at a similar income might say, I'd be better off living in Southeast Michigan, and that may be true. But that by no means eliminates, unfortunately, the large number of families that are experiencing abject poverty in our community.
So let's talk a little bit about the projects and maybe start in Pontiac.
We actually have several large initiatives happening in Pontiac right now. I mentioned to you, some of the work that we did in the pandemic. So we merged in 2019. We obviously did not predict a pandemic, but thankfully we're in a position with our collective capacity to respond to the influx of emergency needs in a big way. A lot of local food pantries had to close down. They did not have the capacity. They had aging volunteers. They did not have the capacity to operate in a safe way. Large numbers of folks, thankfully there was an eviction moratorium, but large numbers of folks were unable to secure housing. The eviction moratorium also meant that there were no open units coming online for people, right? And so the first week of the pandemic, I didn't know how long it was going to go. I heard about a case. I said, we need to be safe. We were still sheltering people with also aging volunteer base who've been doing this work for decades. SOS was founded in 1985. We needed to stop moving our shelter to different locations and having volunteers come in and out and cook meals and have communal meals with people. So we tried to raise some money to respond to this. And we raised enough money initially first we moved everybody into our headquarters building, which we only had because of the merger. And then we started putting people into hotel rooms and purchasing much larger quantities of food to distribute to folks, renting warehouse space and expanding all of our emergency services. We originally set a goal because we didn't know how long this thing was going to go on to raise $25,000 to address, the next few weeks of trying to come up with a new solution. We ended up.
I feel like, and that was quaint.
It was. We ended up raising $3.5 million.
Wow, that's excellent, though.
By June. I think this all happened in March, if I recall. So by June, we had hit about $3.5 million. And we utilized that to basically quadruple the number of people we were sheltering. We went from around 500 families a week we were feeding to around 5,000 families a week that we were feeding. That carried us through that difficult period. But it didn't make progress on the systemic issues of, how do we help stabilize families for the long term. So the reason we actually merged, which went on the back burner a little bit to focus on that, was to make progress on affordable housing development. So aligning South Oakland Shelter's aspirations, Lighthouse's real estate assets, and trying to create a pipeline for both new and preserved affordable housing units. And I'm really excited to say that this year, we're set to close on the redevelopment of two multifamily affordable housing buildings in Pontiac, as well as a new development of 54 units, a 5-story building on Auburn, a new development from the ground up. That was something that we were looking to do when we merged, and now we're in the place where we have the financing and are working to close to make that happen. We're also working on a large redevelopment of our headquarters and campus behind our iconic lighthouse on the Loop. And so those two blocks, we're actually vacating the street between those two blocks and creating one contiguous parcel. And on that parcel will be our administrative headquarters. We have a federally qualified health clinic on site for free and reduced costs, physical, behavioral, and dental services. We have a workforce development partner who's a tenant on site who works on workforce development for returning citizens. And we will have on site Lighthouse's Economic Opportunity Center, which has a Center for Working Families program with financial coaching and other resources, wraparound services, follow-up care for people who've been through our shelter. And then adjacent will be a new building that'll be a social supermarket, which is essentially a client choice food pantry. So instead of folks getting the food boxes they've had to pick up or have delivered to their home during the pandemic, they'll be able to come and shop for themselves. On the roof of that will be a terraced seating area for a cafe that will be adjacent to a 150-person community event space and commercial kitchen. And then we're going to go from about 60 beds in our family emergency shelter to about 150. We're building 2 3-story buildings surrounding that building. So during the pandemic, after we ran out of the money to hotel people, we repurposed a multifamily building that Lighthouse had into a family emergency shelter on our campus. So we're expanding that dramatically. We're building a dining center and also space for some of our runaway homeless youth programs. So we're really excited.
You're up to a lot.
We're busy. We're busy. That totals between the 3 residential buildings and the campus. It's about $75 million we're trying to break ground on this year. We have the financing pretty much in place for all but some of the aspects of the campus. So What we just announced is that we crossed the $13 million mark on our goal to raise $32 million for the redevelopment of the campus. And we're continuing to work to secure the financing we need to make it real.
You're doing a lot of work, and it's amazing. Some of the things I want to circle back to really quick. One specifically, the community choice food pantry. I think that's fascinating because in my mind, that is the kind of thing where, oh, here's a box, here's a whatever. And a lot of times it's not personalized to your situation or, what you're dealing with at your household or your family, your needs or things like that. So I think it's a really interesting thing to add on.
Yeah, well, one of the things we learned during the pandemic, because we started serving much larger populations, is we started learning that if we really wanted to do this well and in a dignified way, we need people to get access to the food that they would otherwise be buying. There's a large Hispanic population in Pontiac. We partner with Carnival Market there, and a big chunk of our food boxes were really specific ethnic foods for people who otherwise would have had to just pick up whatever else we had, right? So we started down that path. We also started down the path of home delivery. We figured, just because you're low income doesn't mean that, you should have to expose yourself to the dangers. Higher income people are now ordering their food delivered
constantly
through Whole Foods on Amazon or through Meijer or whatever it is, or DoorDash. They're all doing that. Why should lower income people be more vulnerable to, particularly lower income people who already have other comorbidities and vulnerabilities? So we developed an app that allowed our volunteers to sign up for home delivery routes during the pandemic. And that was another step in the right direction towards dignity. In fact, more than 60% of our clients actually receive home delivery instead of coming and picking up their boxes of food. We dramatically expanded that through a very generous partnership with Amazon, who dedicated some of their flex delivery drivers to this purpose. And we realized that we'll continue to do a lot of that work, but we want people to have the choice that if they want to come in and have a normal, dignified shopping experience, that's available to them. And that we're building community in a location that's otherwise essentially a food desert. So the cafe that'll be on site, we also hope will be a third place for the neighborhood, for the people that we serve, for our volunteers, for our employees, for our tenants' employees. And it's right across the street from the new Oakland County development that's happening on the Loop as well. So we think it'll be a highly leveraged investment in the downtown area of Pontiac, far beyond what you would typically think of when you think about a human services headquarters.
But as we're learning, so much of this is a holistic approach.
Correct.
Right? So for so long, at least I feel like I've seen so much where it's like, oh, well, we do this one thing. This is the one thing that we do, and then we don't do this other stuff. But it turns out if you want to truly address poverty and you really want to lift people up, there's a lot of things going on.
There is, and I want to make sure to emphasize something, which is that while it sounds like we're doing a lot, and we are doing a lot, we're only able to do that through partnership and collaboration at a high level. So in addition to, we have Oakland Livingston Human Services Agency on our campus providing a Head Start program. We have the Wellness Plan providing the federally qualified health clinic. We have Center for Employment Opportunities providing the workforce development work. And then we do a ton of collaboration with countless other organizations throughout our community. The way I tend to describe Lighthouse, because most people say, when you think about a nonprofit, what do you do? Are you doing food work? Are you doing housing work? Are you doing health care? I said, well, think about kind of the medical model where you have generalists and you have specialists. Lighthouse, we're generalists.
Right.
Our mission is building equitable communities to alleviate poverty. And that's pretty broad. And we don't want to step on any toes. There's so much that needs to be done, and we are deeply under-resourced to meet that need. Not Lighthouse, the whole state.
Yeah, the system seems to have some issues, to say the least.
Indeed. And, we do spend a lot of time in the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector trying to say, how can we as a sector be more equitable? How can we as a sector, move from, as was talked about today at the conference, move from the charity model to the justice model, right? And that's important. We also have to ask ourselves the question of, is it a realistic expectation that philanthropy and scrappy grassroots nonprofits are going to solve poverty? We really have to be thinking about the question of, no matter how equitable we are in the way we behave and we invest our resources, it's not enough resource. And what are we doing together to truly make the case, not just for meeting the true scope of need in our community, but for making the case that meeting that scope of need is entirely beneficial to everyone throughout the economy? That this is not something we should be fighting against. This is something that everyone from business owners to lower wage workers would all benefit from. And that is where I think we need to be collectively focusing our energy in the years ahead.
I think that collaboration is so important. I'm so glad that you mentioned it. I'm so glad that you're doing it because, something I've learned over the years is that nobody gets anything alone, right? Everything comes from other people. And the more we can work together, the better our community is.
Agreed.
Well, I really appreciate you stopping by, Ryan Hertz, Lighthouse Michigan. Thank you for telling me about so much stuff that, honestly, I'm glad I learned a lot today.
Well, me too. I've been learning a ton this week, as I did last year at the conference. It's a great opportunity for people from all backgrounds working on all kinds of different things and from different angles to try to find opportunity to work together. And it's been a pleasure meeting you, Jer.
Absolutely. And if people want to help you out or get involved or volunteer or all that stuff, where can they go?
Well, our website is lighthousemi, as in lighthousemichigan.org. And we're all over social media. That's a really good place to kind of keep up with us. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. Of course, if you've got feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Tomorrow, Devin O'Reilly joins me to talk all things local. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.